Hi, welcome back to another video.
Well, it's that time of year again when it's time to creepify a Halloween doll. And although I've got another video that's coming out soon that will show the whole process, I did want to focus today on just how I'm going to make the eyes for this doll right here. And she's a porcelain doll, so the first thing we need to do is get those eyeballs out. So after taking off the hair, I'm able to access the eyeballs from the inside. Okay. Creepy, but done. So these are her eyeballs. You can see they've got hot glue all over them. And I have some molds. I've made some eyeballs in the past. These are a couple of examples of the bases. And they're about the right size, so this is what I'm going to use. If you notice, though, these two have different sized irises. And I'm not quite sure which one's going to be best, so I'm going to make both. We're going to be using UV resin, so I've got my UV light out, and I built this little holder to hold the lamp. So as I let the UV resin cure, I can just stick it right up underneath here. And I have never done this specific process before, so I've got several molds here. I've got 3 with a smaller iris and 3 with a bigger iris. These are 15mm eyeball molds. That's about 5/8 of an inch. But before we even get into the resin stuff, I need to make a tool. So I've got this pin here. This is a T push pin. And I need to put this onto a little wooden handle. So I've just got this wooden dowel. It used to be the handle to a little sponge brush. And I'm going to take this pin and kind of poke in a hole on one end. And I'm going to go in about 3/8 of an inch. And now I'm going to cut the T off of the top of this so that I just have a straight pin. And this one's pretty thick, so I'm also going to do the same thing with this much thinner sewing pin. You can see the difference in diameter here. But I'm going to do this on the other side of the wooden stick. And then I'll cut the yellow ball off. And I'm going to stick these in so that their back ends go into the wood. And we'll have a nice little tool where we can use the pointy end. And for most of this project, I'm going to be using this UV resin. It's got 3 different viscosities, and I put links down in the description below along with all of the other things that I'm using for this project. So if you want to get some for yourself, feel free to use those affiliate links. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does help the channel. So I'm using the medium viscosity here, and we're going to use it as glue to build our tool. So I've just got a drop here. I'm going to take the back of each of my pins and coat them in the resin and then stick them into the dowel. Then under the UV light, and that will cure the resin, and then we'll have this perfect little tool for when we start making the irises. And here are some other tools we'll be using. I've got toothpicks and bamboo skewers. I've got these nice ball styluses with big fat balls on them, and ball styluses with teeny tiny balls on them. And I'll be using this polymer clay. It's specifically Fimo Soft, and the most important color is white, but I've got a couple of blues there to help out. Also, I'm going to use a heat gun, and of course my UV light. Okay, so we're going to make the scleras, or the base. So the sclera is the white part of the eyeball. I'm using the low viscosity UV resin, so that means it's more, it flows better like water. High viscosity means that it's thicker like honey. Anyway, this, I will say that this set that I got, although it works great, I wish that the viscosities would have been more extreme. So I want to try some with a black sclera instead of a white one, because we're trying to make some creepy eyes, right? This is the first time that I've ever done this full process, so I'm just doing some experimenting here, so stick with me as we figure this out. So I'm putting just a little bit of black pigment it turns out that it's not quite enough, so I need to add some more. And now one thing is that this is UV resin, which means that it cures. It gets hard when I put the UV light on it. And sometimes when you make it opaque, then the light can't get into the center and make the whole thing hard. So I'm taking a risk here with this black. I'm going to try it, see what happens. The reason why I'm using the low viscosity resin is because the last thing we want is bubbles in here. And on these molds, there's kind of a sharp little crease right around where the iris goes. So I'm just dripping this in just a drip at a time, trying to fill in that area without capturing any air bubbles. So I'm going to do that on about half of these molds, and then I will fill it in with the rest of the resin. And while I've got the black resin out, I'm going to make some pupils. So these are molds for larger eyes. I'm not using them right now, so I've flipped them over and they have a flat bottom. And then I'm just using a little dot stylus to make little drips, little circles. I'm trying to match them up. It's important that the surface that I'm doing this on, it's important that it's silicone so that the resin will come off. Also, it needs to be clear so that light can go not just above it, but also underneath it. And now we're going to go through the same process with white resin. So I'll just drop some opaque white pigment in here. And the same way, I'm just going to drip some in, fill in the iris area, and then pour the rest in to fill up the whole mold. Okay, we just put it all under the UV lamp, and I'm going to turn it on for about 5 minutes and let it all cure up. If only it were that easy. So these have sat for a few minutes, and I can pop them out. You can see they're mostly cured, but they're still sticky and tacky. And the black ones are not even close to being cured. Unfortunately, I think they're just too opaque for the UV light to get in and cure everything. So I'm going to have to do plan B to make the scleras. And plan B is to use 2-part epoxy resin instead of UV resin, just for this part. So I've got these cups. They've got measuring on here, so it's 1 part A and 1 part B. We mix them together. So if I pour to this number 1 with A, then I just pour up to the next connected number 1 with B. It's always better to mix more than you need than small amounts, because if you're off by a little bit, that little bit tends to be a bigger proportion of a small amount than it is to a big amount. Does that make sense? Anyway, so I'm going to make more than I need, but I'll go ahead and mix this up. And I've divided it into 2 other containers. I'm going to make one of them white and one of them black, so that we can do the same thing, some white eyes and some black eyes. Now, a few differences here. So this has a pretty high viscosity. I think it's actually thinner than the UV resin, which is nice. So it's going to fill in really well, but it also has so many more bubbles than the UV resin. It's from all of the stirring and everything. And unfortunately, whereas with the UV resin, you can just leave it, let it sit there and let the bubbles rise up until you're ready. This stuff, once you start mixing it, it starts the chemical reaction, and you just got to hope that the bubbles get out in time before it hardens up. People use things like pressure pots and vacuums and stuff, but I don't have any of that, and it would certainly make sure that there's no bubbles, but I'm going to cross my fingers, and we'll let this sit overnight, and we'll check it tomorrow and see how everything turned out. Okay, it's the next day, and I'm popping them out, and they have cured perfectly. They're nice and hard. I actually have no bubbles in them, so they're going to work out great. And what I'm going to do here is I need to be able to hold them to do the next steps. So I've got some corks and some old film canisters and some sticky tack, and I just put that down on top, and then I can push the eyeballs onto it, and I have nice little handles to hold on to as we move into the next step. And for that next step, I'm going to use my big ball styluses, and I'm going to take the eyeballs, and we just need some of the soft Fimo clay, and we're going to sculpt the irises here. So I'm going to start by putting a darker color into the little dent for the iris. And I'm going to use the ball stylus, and as I just push down and kind of wiggle it around, it will fill in that dent, but it also kind of cuts off the clay around the edge. See that? Now it takes some practice, and sometimes it sticks to the stylus, so you kind of work it around. There we go. It's nice and filled in with a nice dish. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing with a piece of the white Fimo clay. And I'm doing it right on top of the blue here. As I push it down, it's going to squish out a bunch of the blue as well. But if you'll see here, it leaves the blue ring right around the edge of the iris. So that's a pretty cool effect. And as I work on this iris, I'm using these special magnifying goggles to be able to see what I'm working on. And with the clay in place, I'm using my needle tools that I made at the beginning, and I'm just going to start in the center and just draw in a bunch of little grooves coming from the middle out. And I start with the fatter needle and then switch to the thinner needle so that there's a variety. And then I'm going to start around the outer edge and pull in towards the middle, just with little tiny strokes. I'm going to enhance this blue line that goes around it, and it adds a cool little variation. And you can see how cool all of the ridges are on this. Okay, we're going to set that aside, and I'm going to do the same thing to each of the eyeballs that I have. Oh yeah, for the black ones, I'm going to do the same process, just with a different set of colors. So I'm going to start with a red. And then on this one, I think I will try the white. On another one, I'm going to do maybe a yellow inside. Okay, I'm going to show you a quick look at what the clay is looking like on these. That one's kind of cool and creepy. This one's just all white. There's no ring around it. And here's the one that you saw at the beginning. I've got these other ones. So the blues are actually a little bit different. These are darker. The other ones are lighter. So I'm going to try to firm up the clay here. So I'm using a heat gun. I've got it on high, and I'm just going to move this hot air across the clay and bake it a little bit. Normally you bake this in like an oven at 275 for 15 minutes. I'm not going to fully bake it because we're going to cover it with resin, but I do want to firm it up a little bit. So I'll just do this for a few minutes, heating it up with the heat gun the best that I can. Now, all the videos that I watched about how to do this next step, everybody suggested using chalk pastels like this. So I'm just using a blade to kind of scrape away, get some dust of the chalk there. And then with a very soft brush, a tiny skinny one, I'm actually going to just use this as kind of paint or chalk dust. And I'm just going to dust it over the lines. And this is how we're introducing actual color into the iris. So I'll kind of paint this around. And I will put a combination of colors throughout this. One thing that I'm trying to do though is I kind of want one spot in the eye to have a lighter color than the rest of it. This will make it look like light is shining down into one specific area. And I only have the most basic colors in chalk pastels, so I also broke out my mica powders, and although they're not quite as thin as the chalk, the pastel chalk dust, they work pretty well to paint, and I have quite a few more options there, like this gold. I've got all of the irises painted, and now we're going to put on the pupils and add a little bit more depth to these. So what I'm going to do is I've got the low viscosity resin. I'm adding a tiny bit of brown to this one. I'm also going to make one with some dark blue, but I want it to be mostly transparent. And I'm just going to drip one little drop in the middle, and that will soak out into all of those grooves and kind of add another level of color inside. And now I'm going to take a couple of pupils, one in each eye. And these are pupils that I made earlier. And since I've got wet resin there, I can put it in the middle. And with my tools, I just kind of line it up into the middle, make sure it's exactly in the center. And when we cure this under the UV light, then that pupil will be connected permanently to the center. If this resin had even lower viscosity, then it would spread out a little bit more. If I put too much in, then I just take a paper towel and kind of dab it out so that there's just what's going into those cracks and a little bit in the center for the pupil. And I'll stick them all under the UV light at the same time and cure them for about 4 or 5 minutes. Probably doesn't need that long because it's just the tiniest bit of resin. With that cured, I'm back to the low viscosity, and I'm going to fill in the whole iris. I'm just trying to fill it up to the levels till it's flat. We'll just drip this in each one and put that under the light and cure it. Now that the resin is hard, the iris is flat across the top, and we'd like that to kind of be domed a little bit. It will give it a little bit of magnification and also make it look like a real eyeball. So I'm going to use the high viscosity resin, which is much thicker, like honey. And we'll just put a single drop right on the top and kind of move it around until it covers the entire iris. Now, I attempted this once before, and everything looked great, but as I let it sit, the resin eventually dripped over the edge. So what I'm going to do here is, once I've got it covered the way that I want, I'm going to stick it in under the light right away to freeze it up before it will drip off the edge. And then I'll just do the same thing for every one of the eyeballs. And once I've cured all of that, then we'll be done with these eyeballs. So let's take a look at the end result here. And I've got several different looks here, so hopefully one of them will work out well for our doll. Don't forget to subscribe so you can catch the video where I make the doll that I use these eyes in. If you have a favorite here, leave me a comment. Let me know which one you think I should do. If you enjoyed this video, please help the channel and help YouTube know that other people might also like it by leaving a thumbs up. And until the next video, don't be bored, be creative.